start.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for filing the FAFSA. We're going to talk about some general information and give you some resources to help you file. My name is Barbie Martin, and I'm the Director of School and Community Outreach here at the Commission, and I'm going to walk you through the FAFSA. Before we get started with the general information, the numbers that you see on our screen are our regional outreach coordinators. We have 8 individuals that are spread throughout the state who work with students in their region. We do have these 8 regions, but any of our outreach coordinators can help you, so feel free to reach out. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see we do have 2 people who are available to help you in Spanish. If you aren't ready to file your FAFSA right this minute as we're going through this presentation, that's fine. Please just keep these numbers on hand so that if you do have questions when you're ready to file, you'll have someone to reach out to. Additionally, one of our community partners is a great resource for filing the FAFSA. Invested, you'll see their number at the screen, 317-715-9007. They work with all things financial aid, but they're definitely on hand to help you if you have questions about something specific, or if you just need someone to help you get started and you don't know where you need to begin. They're happy to help you, and they have several individuals on their staff who are ready to help. I'll run these numbers again at the end, but keep these on hand as we go through if you do have questions. Okay, first we're going to talk about what is the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It does say federal aid, but here at the Commission for Higher Education, the state of Indiana, we do use the FAFSA. That's a good thing for you. That means you only have to fill out one form, and that will make you eligible for any state or federal aid that you qualify for. So one form, one-stop shop. This form is used to determine a student's eligibility for all types of financial aid. It is also the way that you might qualify for federal student loans if that's something that you need. So everything here is in one package. It does get a little confusing. The current FAFSA is still available, so you want to be very careful and make sure that you are filing the correct FAFSA for this year. So if you see here for the coming fall school year that starts in 2021, so a year from now, if you're starting college, you want to file the 2021-2022 FAFSA. That way, that will give you aid for that year. The FAFSA is already open. It opened on October 1st today, but the deadline for Indiana is April 15th. So you do have several months. However, many colleges that give extra financial aid, some of it is on a first-come, first-served basis, or they have a priority deadline of November 1st or December 1st. So the sooner that you can get this filled out, the better. That gives you plenty of time if you need to make corrections, and it will make you eligible for some of that other aid potentially that is going to be distributed by who files first. One caveat I want to remember, free. Never pay to file the FAFSA. When you go to file, I'm going to give you the web address here in just a little bit, but if you Google that, you'll find there are places out there that will help you file the FAFSA for a fee. Never, never do that. There are plenty of places that you can get help for free. Our staff, Invested, the College Financial Aid Office, your high school guidance office, so never pay anyone to file the FAFSA. That's very important. Okay, one thing we're going to talk about, before we talk about the information that you need, we're going to talk about who needs to be on your FAFSA. Are you considered a dependent student, which means you'll need your parent information, or are you an independent student, which means we only need your information? The majority of you are going to be dependent students, and we'll talk about in a minute what makes you independent, but just know for most of you, you are going to need your parents' information. One thing that's important to know, even if you don't live with your parents, or if your parents do not claim you on their taxes, that does not make you independent for the FAFSA. There are some very specific criteria we're going to go over on the next slide. So just know that even if you're not living at home, that doesn't mean you're independent necessarily. So what does make you an independent student? There are several questions on here, and you have to be able to answer yes to at least one of them to be an independent student. So first, if you will be 24 years old by July 1st of the year that you're submitting for. So in this case, we're looking at the 2021-2022 FAFSA. So by July 1st, 2021, you have to be 24 years old if you're using this criteria. If you are married, you can be separated but not divorced. So if you are already married at the time that you're filing the FAFSA, then you are an independent student. If you're working on a graduate degree, that will not be the case for most of you. Most of you are high school students who are getting ready to start college for the first time. A graduate degree is a master's degree or a PhD, something beyond your traditional bachelor's degree. That is not an associate degree. So if you have an associate degree already, you can still be considered a dependent student because you're going toward your bachelor's. The next one, if you have children who receive more than half the support from the student filing the FAFSA, that means monetary support. If you are paying more than half of their care, it doesn't matter what the time that you're spending or if they're spending with other people, but it's looking at who is paying for their care. If you are more than half, then you're independent. Same way if you have other dependents that you are taking care of who are not your children, but still receive more than half of their support from you, you're independent. If you're currently serving in the active duty in the armed forces, you are independent. Or if you're a veteran of the armed forces. The next couple are very important. We do have several students who will qualify through these criteria. If at any time from the age 13 on, so not before 13, but once you turn 13, both of your parents are deceased, if you experienced foster care at any time from 13 on, or were a ward or dependent of the court, you are considered independent. So that does not count prior to 13, but once you turn 13 years old, if any of these things are true, you're independent. If you are an emancipated minor or in a court-ordered legal guardianship, emancipated means there's court paperwork where you became independent prior to turning 18. So again, that doesn't mean that you're living on your own or you've moved out of your parents' home. That means that you have court-documented emancipation. So even if you now are past 18, but if you were emancipated as a minor, you are considered independent. And the last one is if you are an unaccompanied youth who is experiencing homelessness. This is something that every school corporation has a McKinney-Vento liaison who can help you with that paperwork. So if you are living independently, or you are staying with a friend, or you change homes from time to time because you don't have a permanent residence, this may be something that can make you independent, and your school corporation can help you with that paperwork if you need it. If you answered no to all of these, that means you are a dependent student and you must file with your parents' information as well as your own. Okay, next we're going to talk about the FSA ID. This is your username and password that you will use every time you access your FAFSA. This serves as your legal signature. Years ago, you would physically fill out the FAFSA, and then you would sign your name, and your parents would sign their name before they mailed it in. Now, because most FAFSAs are filed online, this is like a digital signature. It's a way for them to know that you are the one filling this out and that it is your information and it's accurate. So you will need your FSA ID, and if you are dependent, at least one of your parents. We get this question a lot as to which parent should create the FSA ID, and the general rule is whichever parent you live with. If both of your parents still live in the same household, you're all in the same home, you can just pick one. It doesn't really matter which one. In my case, because this is the kind of work I do, I am always the parent on the FAFSA for my children, but it makes no difference. If they're both in the same household, you just choose whichever one is going to help you fill this out. If you have siblings, brothers or sisters, who also are filing a FAFSA, your parents only need one FSA ID. So in my case, I have 2 children. They each have their own IDs, and then I have my one ID that we use to sign the FAFSA for both of them. Anytime you make any changes to your FAFSA, even if it's a minor change, you must put this FSA ID at the end for both you and whichever parent you have chosen to do that with. One thing that's important to note is you have to have a Social Security number to be able to create an FSA ID. If there's a circumstance where, say, your parent does not have a Social Security number, but you do, you can still file the FAFSA, but you will have to print out the signature page and mail that in, because without a Social Security number, a parent cannot create that FSA ID that they need. Another thing to think about is you will need a separate email address for each person. So you can't use one email address for both people, for both parent and student. Same way where it asks for a phone number to verify your identity, it will need to be a different phone number for each person. This is creating your unique ID, so every part of it must be different. One thing that's very important to think about, please consider not using your high school email address. Many students use that email address, and then when they graduate, they lose access to that account. This is how the FAFSA verification, if you forget your password, anytime you're going to be contacted, they are going to use the email that you set up with this FSA ID. So it's a much better idea if you use an email address that's not linked to your school. So if you don't have one besides a school address, you can always go to Yahoo, Google, any of the online browsers, and set up a free email account before you start. Okay, now we're going to talk about actually filing the FAFSA. So you've got your FSA ID, you're ready to go. It does take 3 to 5 days to verify your ID, but if you're creating a FSA ID right before you file, you will be able to file and put that number right in there. You just won't be able to look at it to access your FAFSA until everything is verified. So you can still do it all at the same time, but now we're going to actually start filing. The process is much simpler if you have everything together before you start. You can start the FAFSA and save it and come back later if you need to, but if you have everything ready to go when you start to file, it's a pretty simple process, especially if you're working with InvestEd, one of our outreach coordinators, or at a filing event. It's really important to have everything together with you at the time, and then you can get through the process and be completely done with it. So obviously you need your Social Security number, or in certain cases an alien registration number if that applies to you. It will ask you for your driver's license number if applicable. This is important, your 2019 federal tax returns. That is the year that you're using this year to file the FAFSA. It doesn't matter if you're filing the day it opens on October 1st or the day it closes on April 15th. It's 2019 federal tax returns, regardless of when you're doing it. Also, you will need your W-2s and any other records of money that you earned that may not be taxable income. Bank statements, if you have investments, you'll need that if applicable. And then, of course, the FSA ID that we spoke about before. One question that comes up, it's very important that you use the 2019 income accurately. We realize, given the circumstances, lots of families' incomes have changed since 2019, but you need to file with the information as it was at that time. There is a process by which you can make changes to it, but it's very important that it gets filed accurately so there are no delays with your FAFSA or there are no errors that have to be corrected. It's called professional judgment. So once you file your FAFSA, if the income is very different and you need to have that adjusted, the College Financial Aid Office can help you do that. They'll tell you what kind of documentation they need, and they can actually then go in and make changes to your FAFSA for you after you have filed with the correct year's taxes. So that's very important. There are different ways to file. File electronically online at FAFSA.org. That address is very important. Write that down if you're not ready to file right now. This is the official federal government website. It will be free, and you know that your information will be secure. So that if you're going to file online, that's the website to go to. You can see a picture. There is also a My Student Aid app that is available for both Android and iPhone. The one thing about this, they are currently updating this app, and you won't be able to file through the app itself until December of 2020. If you have the app already and you go to file, it will simply take you to your phone's web browser. So you can still use a phone to file the FAFSA if you like, but it's going to take you to the website. You're not able to do it via the actual app yet. That will be in December. If you do not have a way to file online, you still can mail in an application. If you can't download that form yourself, if you don't have access to print that out, ask someone in your school, another adult that helps you with these things, and they can help you download and print out a paper copy. But you're going to have a much easier time if you're able to file electronically. You're going to get a much quicker response, and you're going to be able to make adjustments and corrections as you need to. So any of these three ways to file will work. Another benefit of filing online, if your parents and yourself, if you filed your taxes, you can use the IRS Data Retrieval tool in many circumstances. This allows you to directly pull in all of your tax information. A couple of reasons this is helpful is it's much faster. You don't have to sit there and manually type in all the income information, and it's also more accurate. You don't have to worry about accidentally hitting the wrong number. They're pulling it in directly from the IRS, and so it's going to match what was on your tax returns exactly. One thing that you should know is once you have pulled that in, as a safety precaution, you will not be able to see that information on your FAFSA. It will still calculate everything it's supposed to. You'll still be eligible for aid, but you won't be able to see what was pulled in just for security purposes. Certain types of tax filers cannot use this tool. For example, if you are married or your parents are married but filed separately, you will not be able to use the IRS Data Retrieval tool. You will have to type that information in manually. So that's always an option. You can always put it in there. But if you can use the tool, it does make things a lot simpler. Excuse me. One thing that's important is that it should match exactly. For example, my legal name is Barbara, so that is what is on my tax returns. I go by the name Barbie, but Barbara is my name. So when I go to use this data retrieval tool, I have to put in my full legal name. The address has to match. All of those pieces have to match exactly. So that's why it's important to still have that tax return handy so that you can match that up and pull that information in. You will still need copies of your W-2s. For example, if you have a married situation and you're filing jointly, the next question is still going to ask you, well, person A made how much and person B made how much? So you will need your W-2s to be able to answer those questions. So that's why at the beginning when we gave the list of what you need both the return and the individual W-2s so that you can provide that information. Once you file, you can look up your FAFSA status, going back into your application with your FSA ID. Processing, this means they have received what you submitted, but it hasn't been processed by the federal processor yet. It usually takes 3 to 5 days. It does sometimes take a little longer at certain peak times, right when the FAFSA opens, for example, and especially when you get in your deadline times, then it may take a little longer, but in general, it takes 3 to 5 business days for them to process that. Once that happens, your status will change to processed successfully. That means it's successful and you don't need to provide any additional information. The next one comes up quite a bit, missing signatures. If you remember, I said you have to put that FSA ID in every single time you make any changes to the FAFSA. So if you forget to do that, this is going to come up. Your application is missing required signatures. Or it will say that if you have to mail in the signature page, until they receive that page in the mail, this is going to be the status that you're going to get. And then the last one, action required. So for example, if you've left some questions blank, or if something that you put in there doesn't make sense, or if you put in that you have not yet filed certain things, it's going to ask you to go back in and make those corrections. They're called edits or corrections, so if you see that it says edits needed, that's what it means. There's something that you need to correct. And it will tell you specifically in what areas that you need to make that correction. One of the biggest edits that we get is we have students who say they are not a first-time college student when they are. So those kinds of questions, there are little pop-up boxes that will help you to determine what answer that needs to be corrected and what you should put. But if you have those, then it's very important you go in to make those corrections. In most cases, you will not be able to get either federal or state aid until those corrections have been made. The next important piece of information is the student aid report. Once they have successfully processed your FAFSA and there aren't any corrections that need to be made, it's going to give you a summary of the information that you submitted. You will receive an email with instructions on how to get to your SAR, your student aid report. So that's why it's very important that you put in an email that you're going to have access to. This is not an award letter. It's not going to show you a specific amount of aid that you're going to receive, but it will give you your expected family contribution, your EFC, and that is used to determine your eligibility for certain types of aid. So for example, one of the biggest federal aid programs is called the Pell Grant, and the Pell Grant uses your EFC to determine if you're eligible for federal aid. At the state side, we use the EFC for the O'Bannon grant. And so that will give you an idea of where you are on that spectrum, whether you're going to be able to receive aid or not. Later, you will receive an official award letter from the colleges that you're admitted to, and one from the state of Indiana regarding any state aid you're eligible for. But for this purposes, it's just going to show you your EFC and your general information, so you'll be able to see if everything is correct. The last thing we want to go over, there are some different resources. Several of these are just general college resources in general. We have our Learn More Indiana website, learnmore.org, and there's lots of information out there about both college and career preparation. Our resources for filing the FAFSA, but also for scholarship searches, internships, all those kinds of things that relate to preparing for college. We do have social media accounts as well, our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts. We post events such as the one that we're holding tonight about the FAFSA. So if you need more information, if you follow our social media, you'll see lots of different things are posted on those different accounts. Our YouTube account has lots of videos. This video itself is going to be posted there, but we have things about completing your Scholar Success Program activities, how to apply for colleges, how to look for internships. So there are many videos over lots of different topics. And then for specific FAFSA information, there's a Federal Student Aid Center that you can also call, 800-4-FED-AID. You can see that number there. So if you have very specific FAFSA questions, or if you have technical questions about the FAFSA, this is where you can reach out to. Before we finish, I want to give you these phone numbers again for our outreach coordinators. So please make sure you jot these down if you have questions. They can answer all kinds of questions for you about the FAFSA, but also about state aid in general. If you're a 21st Century Scholar, they can help you with those activities. If you need help being connected to certain college admissions office, financial aid office, we can help you with that. And then finally, InvestEd's number, once again, they're a great source of information and a great partner for us. And they are also available to help you anytime. If you call that number, if you don't get my outreach coordinators or you don't get InvestEd, please leave a message and they will get back to you. And if you have questions, we're always here to help. Thank you very much.